Ai-Laʻau, the forest-eating god who fled from Pele. What kind of god flees from his own volcano? Before Pele claimed Kilauea, there was Ai-Laʻau, the fire deity who devoured entire forests in black smoke and molten lava. But when Pele stepped onto the island of Hawaiʻi, Ai-Laʻau vanished. Ai-Laʻau, the forest eater. When Pele came to the island Hawaiʻi seeking a permanent home, she found another god of fire already in possession of the territory. Ai-Laʻau was known and feared by all the people. Ai means the one who eats or devours. Laʻau means tree, or a forest. Ai-Laʻau was, therefore, the fire god devouring forests. Time and again he laid the districts of South Hawaii desolate by the lava he poured out from his fire pits. He was the god of the insatiable appetite, the continual eater of trees, whose path through forests was covered with black smoke fragrant with burning wood, and sometimes burdened with the smell of human flesh charred into cinders in the lava flow. Ai-Laʻau seemed to be destructive and was so named by the people, but his fires were a part of the forces of creation. He built up the islands for future life. The process of creation demanded volcanic activity. The flowing lava made land. The lava disintegrating made earth deposits and soil. Upon this land storms fell, and through it multitudes of streams found their way to the sea. Flowing rivers came from the cloud-capped mountains. Fruitful fields and homes made this world-building complete. Fire fountains in Halemaumau, Kilauea. Ai-Laʻau still poured out his fire. It spread over the fertile fields, and the natives feared him as the destroyer, giving no thought to the final good. He lived, the legends say, for a long time in a very ancient part of Kilauea, on the large island of Hawaii, now separated by a narrow ledge from the great crater and called Kilauea Iki, Little Kilauea. This seems to be the first and greatest of a number of craters extending in a line from the Great Lake of Fire in Kilauea to the seacoast many miles away. They are called the pit craters because they are not hills of lava, but a series of sunken pits going deep down into the earth, some of them still having blowholes of sputtering steam and smoke. After a time, Ai-Laʻau left these pit craters and went into the Great Crater and was said to be living there when Pele came to the seashore far below. In one of the Pele stories is the following literal translation of the account of her taking Kilauea. When Pele came to the island Hawaii, she first stopped at a place called Keahialaka in the district of Puna. From this place, she began her inland journey toward the mountains. As she passed on her way, there grew within her an intense desire to go at once and see Ai-Laʻau, the god to whom Kilauea belonged, and find a resting place with him as the end of her journey. She came up, but Ai-Laʻau was not in his house. Of a truth, he had made himself thoroughly lost. He had vanished because he knew that this one coming toward him was Pele. He had seen her toiling down by the sea at Keahialaka. Trembling dread and heavy fear overpowered him. He ran away and was entirely lost. When Pele came to that pit, she laid out the plan for her abiding home, beginning at once to dig up the foundations. She dug day and night and found that this place fulfilled all her desires. Therefore, she fastened herself tight to Hawaii for all time. These are the words in which the legend disposes of this ancient god of volcanic fires. He disappears from Hawaiian thought, and Pele from a foreign land finds a satisfactory crater in which her spirit power can always dig up everlastingly overflowing fountains of raging lava. How Pele came to Hawaii. The simplest, most beautiful legend does not mention the land from which Pele started. In this legend, her father was Momoia Oli, the chief who dreamed of trouble. Her mother was Haumea, or Papa, who personified Mother Earth. Momoia apparently is not mentioned in any other of the legends. Haumea is frequently named as the mother of Pele, as well as the heroine of many legendary experiences. Pele's story is that of wanderlust. She was living in a happy home in the presence of her parents, and yet for a long time she was stirred by thoughts of faraway lands. At last, she asked her father to send her away. This meant that he must provide a seagoing canoe with mat sails, sufficiently large to carry a number of persons and food for many days. "What will you do with your little egg, sister?" asked her father. Pele caught the egg, wrapped it in her skirt to keep it warm near her body, and said that it should always be with her. Evidently, in a very short time, the egg was changed into a beautiful little girl who bore the name Hiaka Ika Polio Pele, Hiaka in the bosom of Pele, the youngest one of the Pele family. After the care of the helpless one had been provided for, Pele was sent to her oldest brother, Kamohoʻaliʻi, the king of dragons, or, as he was later known in Hawaiian mythology, the god of sharks. He was a sea god and would provide the great canoe for the journey. While he was getting all things ready, he asked Pele where she was going. She replied, "I am going to Bola Bola, to Kwaihelani, to Kan Huna Moku, then to Moku Mana Mana, then to see a queen, Kauahi, her name, and Nihau, her island." Apparently, her journey would be first to Bola Bola in the Society Islands, then among the mysterious ancestral islands, and then to the northwest until she found Nihau, the most northerly of the Hawaiian group. The god of sharks prepared his large canoe and put it in the care of some of their relatives, Kane Pua Hio Hio, Kane the whirlwind, Keau Miki, the strong current, and Keau Ka, moving seas. Pele was carried from land to land by these wise boatmen until at last she landed on the island Nihau. Then she sent back the boat to her brother, the shark god. It is said that after a time he brought all the brothers and sisters to Hawaii. Pele was welcomed and entertained. Soon she went over to Kauai, the large, beautiful garden island of the Hawaiian group. There is a story of her appearance as a dream maiden before the king of Kauai, whose name was Lohio, whom she married, but with whom she could not stay until she had found a place where she could build a permanent home for herself and all who belonged to her. She had a magic digging tool, pawa. When she struck this down into the earth, it made a fire pit. It was with this pawa that she was to build a home for herself and Lohio. She dug along the lowlands of Kauai, but water drowned the fires she kindled, so she went from island to island but could only dig along the beach near the sea. All her fire pits were so near the water that they burst out in great explosions of steam and sand, and quickly died, until at last she found Kilauea on the large island of Hawaii. There she built a mighty enduring palace of fire, but her dream marriage was at an end. The little sister Hiaka, after many adventures, married Lohiau and lived on Kauai. Another story says that Pele was the daughter of Kanehoʻalani and Hina. The oldest and most authoritative legends say that Kanehoʻalani was her brother, and that Hina was the creator of a flood or great tidal wave which drove Pele from place to place over the ocean. This story says that Pele had a husband, Wahioloa, who ran away from her with a sister named Pele Kumu Kalani, and that Pele searched the islands of the great ocean as she followed them, but never found them. At last, Pele came to Hawaii and escaped the flood by finding a home in Kilauea. In this story, she was said to have a son, Menehune, and a daughter, Laka. There is very little foundation for this legend. Wahioloa was a chief, well known in the legends, of a famous family of New Zealand and other South Sea islands. Laka was his son, who cut down trees by day which were set up again at night by the fairies. The Menehunes were the fairy folk of Hawaii. The story of Pele's search for a husband has been widely accepted by foreigners, but not by the early Hawaiian writers. The most authoritative story of the coming of Pele to Hawaii was published in the Hoku o Ka Pakipika, Star of the Pacific, in the story of Aukelenui Aiku in 1861, and in another Hawaiian paper, Ke Kuokoa, in 1864, and again in 1865. Again and again, the legends give Kuaha'ilo as the father and Haumea as the mother of the Pele family. Hina is sometimes said to be Kuaha'ilo's sister in these legends. She quarreled with him because he devoured all the people. The Hawaiians as a nation, even in their traditions, have never been cannibals, although their legends give many individual instances of cannibalism. The Pele stories say that Kuaha'ilo was a cannibal, and Haumea was a pali, precipice, or a prominent part of the earth. The Hawaiians, it is safe to say, had no idea of reading nature thoughts into these expressions, thus making them nature myths. They probably did not understand that Kuwaha Ilo might mean destructive earth forces, and Haumea might mean the earth itself, from whom Pele, the goddess of fire, and Namakaʻokahai, the goddess of the sea, were born. It is, however, interesting to note that this is the fact in the legends, and that it was in a conflict between the two sisters that Namakaʻokahai drove Pele to the Hawaiian Islands. A greater sorcerer married Namakaʻokahai. After a time, he saw Pele and her beautiful young sister Hiaka. He took them secretly to be his wives. This sorcerer was Aukelenuia Iku. Au might mean to swim, and Kele to glide, or slip smoothly along. The name then might mean the great smoothly swimming son of Iku. He could fly through the heavens, swim through the seas, or run swiftly over the earth. By magic power, he conquered enemies, visited strange lands, found the fountain of the water of life, sprinkled that water over his dead brothers, brought them back to life, and did many marvelous deeds. But he could not deliver Pele and Hiaka from the wrath of their sister. High tides and floods from the seas destroyed Pele's home and lands. Then the elder brother of Pele, Kamohoʻali, the shark god, called for all the family to aid Pele. Namakaʻokahai fought the whole family and defeated them. She broke down their houses and drove them into the ocean. There, Kamohoʻali provided them with the great boat Honua Iakea, the great spread-out world, and carried them away to distant islands. Namakaʻokahai went to the highest of all the mythical lands of the ancestors, Numea Lani, the raised dais of heaven. There she could look over all the seas from Kalaki Nui Akane to Kauai, i.e., from a legendary land in the south to the most northerly part of the Hawaiian Islands. Pele carried her paua, a magic spade. Wherever they landed, she struck the earth, thus opening a crater in which volcanic fires burned. As the smoke rose to the clouds, the angry Watching One rushed from Numealani and tried to slay the family. Again and again, they escaped. Farther and farther from the homeland were they driven until they struck far out into the ocean. Namakaʻokahai went back to her lookout mountain. After a long time, she saw the smoke of earth fires far away on the island Kauai. Pele had struck her paua into the earth, dug a deep pit, and thrown up a large hill known to this day as the Pu'o Pele, the Hill of Pele. It seemed as if an abiding place had been found. But the sister came and fought Pele. There is no long account of the battle. Pele was broken and smashed and left for dead. She was not dead, but she left Kauai and went to Oahu, to a place near Honolulu, to Moanalua, a beautiful suburb. There she dug a fire pit. The earth, or rather the eruption of lava, was forced up into a hill which later bore the name Ke Alia Manu, the bird white like a salt bed, or the white bird. The crater which she dug filled up with salt water and was named Ke Alia Pa Kai, the white bed of salt, or salt lake. Pele was not able to strike her paua down into a mountainside and dig deep for the foundations of her home. She could find fire only in the lowlands near the seashore. The best place on Oahu was just back of Leahi, the ancient Hawaiian name for Diamond Head. Here she threw up a great quantity of fire rock, but at last her fires were drowned by the water she struck below. Thus she passed along the coast of each island, the family watching and aiding until they came to the great volcano Haleakala. There Pele dug with her paua, and a great quantity of lava was thrown out of her fire pit. Namakaʻokahai saw enduring clouds day after day rising with the colors of the dark, dense smoke of the underworld, and knew that her sister was still living. Pele had gained strength and confidence. Therefore, she entered alone into a conflict unto death. The battle was fought by the two sisters hand to hand. The conflict lasted for a long time along the western slope of the mountain Halakala. Namakaʻokahai tore the body of Pele and broke her lava bones into great pieces which lie to this day along the seacoast of the district called Kahikinui. The masses of broken lava are called na iwio Pele, the bones of Pele. Pele was thought to be dead and was sorely mourned by the remaining brothers and sisters. Na Makaʻokahai went off toward Numealani, rejoicing in the destruction of her hated enemy. By and by, she looked back over the wide seas. The high mountains of the island Hawaiʻi, snow-covered, lay in the distance. But over the side of the mountain known as Mauna Loa, she saw the Uhan, the spirit form of Pele, in clouds of volcanic smoke tinged red from the flames of raging fire pits below. She passed on to Numealani, knowing that she could never again overcome the spirit of Pele, the goddess of fire. The Pele family crossed the channel between the islands and went to the mountainside, for they also had seen the spirit form of Pele. They served their goddess sister, caring for her fires and pouring out the destructive rivers of lava at her commands. As time passed, they became a part of the innumerable multitude of aumakuas, or ghost gods, of the pit of Pele, worshipped especially by those whose lives were filled with burning anger against their fellow men. The acceptable offerings to Pele were fruits, flowers, garlands, or leis, pigs, especially the small black pig of tender flesh and delicate flavor, chickens, fish, and men. When a family sent a part of the dead body of one of the household, it was with the prayer that the spirit might become an aumakua, and especially an unihipili aumakua. This meant a ghost god, powerful enough to aid the worshipper to pray other people to death. Pele is said to have become impatient at times with her brothers and sisters. Then she would destroy their pleasure resorts in the valleys. She would send a flood of lava in her anger and burn everything up. Earthquakes came when Pele stamped the floor of the fire pit in anger. Flames thrusting themselves through cracks in a breaking lava crust were the fire spears of Pele's household of aumakuas, or ghost gods. Pele's voice was explosive when angry. Therefore, it was called Pu. When the natives first heard guns fired, they said that the voice of the gun was Pu. It was like the explosions of gas in volcanic eruptions, and it seemed as if the foreigners had persuaded Pele to assist them in any trouble with the natives. Pele and the Owl Ghost God. Many, many years after Pele's angry sister Namakaʻokahai had driven her from the island Kauai, and after the land had many dwellers therein, a quarrel arose between two of the highest chiefs of the island. They were named Koa and Kau. It did not become an open conflict immediately, but Koa was filled with such deep hatred that he was ready to employ any means to destroy his enemy. There was a mighty kupua, or dragon of the Pi family, at that time on Kauai. These dragons had come, according to the legends, to the Hawaiian Islands from the faraway lands of Kwaihelani as attendants on the first young chief Kahanai Akeakua, the boy brought up by the gods. These dragons had the mana, or magic power of appearing as men or as dragons according to their desire. This dragon was named Pi Kalalau, or Pi, the one dwelling at Kalalau. He was supposed to be semi-divine. His home was on the crest of an almost inaccessible precipice up which he would rush with incredible speed. Koa, the angry chief, came to this precipice and called Pi to come to him. There they plotted the death of Kau, the enemy. Assuming the appearance of a splendidly formed young man, Pi went down among the natives with Koa to watch for an opportunity to seize Kau. After a time, Kau was lured to go at night to a house far from his own home. As he entered the door, he received a heavy blow which smashed the bones of one shoulder and laid him prostrate. A great giant leaped out, thrusting an enormous spear at him. Kau was one of the most skillful of all chiefs in what was known as spear practice. He avoided the thrusts and leaped to his feet. He had a wooden dagger as his only weapon, but could not get near enough to the giant to use it. Just as he was becoming too weary to move, his wife, who had followed him, hurled rocks, striking the giant's face, then seizing her husband fled with him homeward. There followed a great battle in which Pi attacked all the warriors belonging to the wounded chief. The legends say that this giant was 12 feet high. He had eyes as large as a man's fist and an immense mouth full of tusks like those of a wild hog. His legs were as large as trees, and his weight was such that wherever he stepped, there were great holes in the ground. The warriors fled as this mighty giant charged upon them. Suddenly, they stopped and rushed back. Their chief's wife had caught an aikoi, a heavy piece of wood fastened to a long, stout cord. This she hurled so that it twisted around him and bound his arms to his sides. Stones and spears beat upon him, but he broke the cocoa fiber cords of the aikoi and again drove the warriors before him, trying to gain the house where the wounded chief cow was lying. There was an old prophetess who had rushed to the side of her master when he was brought to his home. She was one of the worshippers of Pele, the fire goddess of the island Hawaiʻi. Powerful were her prayers and incantations. Soon, out of the clear sky above the conflict appeared Pele, hurling a fierce bolt of lightning at the giant. It struck the ground at his feet, almost overthrowing him. A second flash of lightning blinded and stunned him. It was a curious element of old Hawaiian belief, but they did believe that demigods and supernatural beings had aumakuas, or ghost gods, the spirits of their ancestors, to whom they prayed and offered sacrifice as if they were common people and needed ghost gods to take care of them. P, smitten by this new danger, called for Pueo, his most mighty ghost god. Pele's fire darts were falling upon him, and he was near death. Then came Pueo flying down from the steep places of the mountain. Pueo was a great owl in which dwelt one of the most powerful of Pi's ancestors. Pueo hovered over the head of Pi facing Pele. Whenever Pele hurled her fiery darts, the owl swiftly thrust his head from side to side, catching them in his beak, and with a shake of the head tossing them off to the ground. Then came the warriors in a great body around the giant and his ghost god. Thickly flew their spears and darts. Great clouds of stones were hurled, and both Pi and his owl god were grievously wounded. Pele's flashes of lightning were coming with great rapidity. The giant called to his aumakua to fly to the mountains, and then, suddenly changing himself into his dragon form, he dashed up the precipice toward his home. The warriors were so surprised at the wonderful change that they forgot to fight, and only realized that this dragon was their enemy when they saw him far out of the reach of their best weapons. They could see that dragon leaping from stone to stone and swiftly gliding up the steep precipice. He escaped to his home in the mountain recesses and never more troubled the chief by the sea. His employer was killed in a later battle. Pele returned to her home in the volcano Kilauea. The hills of Pele, Napu o Pele. Through the fleeting hours of Tuesday, January 8th, in the year 1907, earthquakes were felt all over the island of Hawaii. Soon after midnight, as the stars of the new day Wednesday, January 9th, looked down on the melting snows of Mauna Loa, a glorious firelight broke out on the southern slope. This light filled the sky above the mountain and was visible from all parts of the island. The Hawaiians said, "Pele has come again." For some hours, great floods of lava poured forth with extraordinary activity, quickly covering a vast area of land on the side of the mountain about 4,000 feet below the summit crater. Then, as the brilliant light of the sun took the place of the glow of volcanic fires, clouds of eruptive gases and smoke marked the course of the lava in its flow down the mountainside. Moreover, for nearly 2 days, the lava found an underground channel from which it burst forth at times, with explosions attended by earthquakes which shook the western coast of the island. Puffs of smoke by day and pillars of fire by night marked the course of this underground channel. Thus, for nearly 3 days, the country throbbed with excitement because of the uncertainty attending the continued action of the lava flow. Then came Friday evening, and a sky flooded with an ocean of fire. The lava burst from the side of the mountain about halfway between the summit and the sea in magnificent tossing waves, a river hundreds of feet across, dashing over old lava flows, burning the ferns and trees of the forest which had grown on lava 100 years and more of age. Down it forced its way, sometimes cooling in great stone masses, crunching and crushing against each other, sometimes a rough mass of cinders resting upon a moving bed of fire, and sometimes a swiftly moving liquid stream pushing from under a cooling surface and continually pressing downward toward the sea. Meanwhile, as this lava flow was making its descent, another branch broke away westward. A little hill of lava frozen ages before into a massive breastwork of black stone standing in the front of this flow of 1907 divided it so that this western branch took its own way to the ocean beach. Thus, this mighty force of melted rock from the underworld hurled its vast mass down the mountain, piling itself over all life in its path and leaving only towering heaps of desolation to cover the earth. Between these two branches of the lava river lay stretched a tract of ancient lava several miles wide, desolate and dreary save for small clumps of trees and patches of ferns and grass. At the end of this uncovered old lava, two symmetrical mounds rise from the rugged, splintered rocks. These are marked on the maps of the large island as Napu o Pele, the Hills of Pele. In the summer of 1905, two friends journeyed across the desolate country which has been made more desolate by the eruption of 1907. Wearied by the hours passed in traveling over lava sharp as broken glass, these friends found a grass-covered resting place and there waited for their fatigue to pass away. In a little while, some Hawaiians drew near. "Aloha uku, friendship to you," was the greeting to them. "Aloha olua, friendship to you also," was the reply. "This place is deserted by almost all life." Surely one cannot expect it to add any story to Hawaiian mythology. Aye, there is a story which belongs to the two hills of Pele down by the sea. That summer day, on the lava of long ago, so long ago that its date is not recorded, we heard the story of the chiefs of Kahuku and the fiery and voluptuous goddess of the volcanic forces of the Hawaiian Islands. Kahuku, the land now under past and present lava flows, was at one time luxuriant and beautiful. The sugarcane and taro beds were bordered by flowers and shaded by long branching trees. Villages here and there marked the population which supported the chiefs of Kahuku. Two of the young chiefs were splendid specimens of manhood. They both excelled in the sports and athletic feats which were the chief occupation of those days. Wherever a hillside was covered with grass and the ground properly sloping, holua races were carried on. Very narrow sleds, holua, with long runners were used in these races. Maidens and young men vied with each other in mad rushes over the holua courses. Usually the body was thrown headlong on the sled as it was pushed over the brink of the little hill at the beginning of the slide. Sometimes the more courageous riders would rest on hands and knees while only the very skillful dared stand upright during the swift descent. Pele, the goddess of fire, loved this sport and often appeared as a beautiful and athletic princess. She carried her sled with her to Kahuku to the Holua hillside and easily surpassed all the women in grace and daring. Soon the two handsome young chiefs saw her and challenged her to race with them. For hours they sported together, the chiefs led captive by the charms of the goddess. Jealous of each other, they strove to win Pele each to his own home. Thus the days passed by, filled with sports and pleasures. At last, the young men became suspicious of their companion. Her love was so fitful and capricious, sometimes burning with a raging fire toward her friends, and sometimes filled with hot anger on very slight provocation. At last a warning came that this beautiful stranger might be the goddess Pele from the other side of the island, that her home was in Halemaumau, the continuing house, of the volcano Kilauea, her attendants the always leaping flames, the caves filled with rolling waves of fire her dwelling rooms, that she carried the control of the fires of the underworld with her wherever she went. The young chiefs talked together concerning their experiences and then began to draw away from their dangerous visitor. But Pele made it difficult for them to escape from her presence. She continually called them to race with her. At last the grass began to die. The soil became warm and the heat intense. Slight earthquakes made themselves felt. The tides were more snappy as they cast their surf waves along the beach. The chiefs became afraid. Pele saw it and was overcome with anger. Her appearance changed. Her hair floated out in tangled masses, touched by the breath of hot winds. Her arms and limbs shone as if enwrapped with fire. Her eyes blazed like lightning, and her breath poured forth in volumes of smoke. In great terror, the chiefs rushed toward the sea. Pele struck the ground heavily with her feet. Again and again she stamped in wrath. Earthquakes swept the lands of Kahuku. Then the awful fiery flood broke from the underworld and swept down over Kahuku. On the crest of the falling torrent of fire rode Pele, flashing the fires of her anger in great explosions above the flood. The chiefs tried to flee toward the north, but Pele hurled the ferocious torrents beyond them to turn them back. Then they fled toward the south, but Pele again forced them back upon their own lands. Then they hurried down to the beach, hoping to catch one of their canoes and escape on the ocean. Quickly, these young men leaped on. Swiftly came the fiery flood behind them. Pele was urging the underworld forces to their utmost speed. Shrieking like fierce whistling winds, tearing her hair and throwing it away in bunches, Pele sped after the chiefs. The floods of lava, obeying the commands of the goddess, spread out over all the land of the chiefs, so that from the mountain to the sea, the luxuriant lands became desolate. Nearer and nearer to the sea came the swift runners. It seemed as if they had found the way of escape, for the surf waves waited eagerly to welcome them, and a canoe lay near the beach. But Pele leaped from the flowing lava and threw her burning arms around the nearest one of her former lovers. In a moment, the lifeless body was thrown to one side. The lava piled itself up around it, while at the command of Pele, a new gush of lava rose up like a fresh crater and swallowed up all that was left. The other chief was petrified by fear and horror. In a moment, Pele seized him and called for another outburst of lava, which rose up rapidly around them. In a few minutes, the hills of Pele were built. Thus the lovers of Pele died, and thus their tombs were made. For many years, even from ancient times, they have marked the destruction of the beautiful lands of Kahuku. Later, lava flows have turned aside to spare the monuments of the chiefs with whom Pele played for a time, and the two hills of Pele are still seen near the shore of the ocean. Pele and the chiefs of Puna, Kumukahi. According to the legends, Pele was very quickly angered. Her passions were as turbulent as the lake of fire in her crater home. Her love burned, but her anger devoured. She was not safe. Kumukahi was a chief who pleased Pele. According to the legends, he was tall, well-built, and handsome, and a great lover of the ancient games. Apparently, he had known Pele only as a beautiful young chiefess. For one day, when he was playing with the people, an old woman with fiery eyes came to him demanding a share in the sports. He ridiculed her. She was very persistent. He treated her with contempt. In a moment, her anger flashed out in a great fountain of volcanic fire. She chased the chief to the sea, caught him on the beach, heaped up a great mound of broken lava over him, and poured her lava flood around him and beyond him, far out into the ocean. Thus, the traditions say Cape Kumukahi, the southeast point of the island Hawaii, was formed. Here, kings, chiefs, and priests have come for ages to build great piles of lava rock with many ceremonies. The natives call these funeral mounds and name them after the builders, although the persons themselves were seldom placed underneath in burial. When Hawaiians, who had been ill, recovered, they frequently vowed to make a journey of health. This meant that they came to the place now known as Ai-Laʻau Bay. There they bathed by the beautiful little coconut island, fished up by the demigod Maui. There they swam around a stone known as Moku Ola, the island of life. Then they walked along the seashore day after day until they were below the volcano of Kilauea. They went up to the pit of Pele, offered sacrifices, and then followed an overland path back to Ai-Laʻau. It was an ill omen if for any reason they went back by the same path. They must make the journey of health with the face forward. Hopo, the dancing stone, Kapaho, the green lake, and Kumukahi were among the places which must be visited. They all have their Pele legends. On the shortest path from Kumukahi to Kilauea, is a great field of many acres of lava stumps. These, according to the best theories, were made by immense floods of lava pouring down upon large forests of living trees. Lava always cools rapidly on the surface. Therefore, as the lava spread out through the forest, very soon there was a great floor of hot black stone pierced by a multitude of trees. Some of these burned very slowly. The flowing lava would easily push itself up through the small opening around a burning tree and would keep on pushing and building up a higher and higher cone of lava as the tree burned away until the tree was destroyed. These cones rise sometimes 10 to 15 feet above the lava floor. They frequently have well-preserved masses of charcoal as their core. This is nature's method of making lava stumps. This field of hundreds of lava stumps has a different origin according to the legends. Papalauahi. Papalauahi, the fire leaf smothered out, was a chief who at one time ruled the district of Puna. He excelled in the sports of the people. It was his great delight to gather all the families together and have feasts and games. He challenged the neighboring chiefs to personal contests of many kinds, and almost always was the victor. One day the chiefs were sporting on the hillsides around a plain where a multitude of people could see and applaud. Pele heard a great noise of shouting and clapping hands and desired to see the sport. In the form of a beautiful woman, she suddenly appeared on the crest of one of the hills down which Papalauahi had been coasting. Borrowing a sled from one of the chiefs, she prepared to race with him. He was the more skillful, and soon proved to her that she was beaten. Then followed taunts and angry words, and the sudden absolute loss of all self-control on the part of Pele. She stamped on the ground and floods of lava broke out, destroying many of the chiefs as they fled in every direction. The watching people, overcome with wonder and fear, were turned into a multitude of pillars of lava, never changing, never moving through all the ages. Papalauahi fled from his antagonist, but she rode on her fiery surf waves, urging them on faster and faster until she swept him up in the flames of fire, destroying him and all his possessions. Kelikuku. Another chief was the one who was called in Hawaiian legends Kelikuku, the Puna chief who boasted. He was proud of Puna, celebrated as it was in song and legend. Beautiful Puna, clear and beautiful, like a mat spread out, shining like sunshine edged by the forest of Malio. Ancient chant. Kelikuku visited the island Oahu. He always boasted that nothing could be compared with Puna and its sweet-scented trees and vines. He met a prophet of Pele, Kaneakalau, whose home was on the island Kauai. The prophet asked Kelikuku about his homeland. The chief was glad of an opportunity to boast. The chief was known to have said, "I am Kelikuku of Puna. My country is charming. Abundance is found there. Rich sandy plains are there, where everything grows wonderfully." The prophet ridiculed him, saying, "Return to your beautiful country. You will find it desolate. Pele has made it a heap of ruins. The trees have descended from the mountains to the sea. The ohia and puhala are on the shore. The houses of your people are burned. Your land is unproductive. You have no people. You cannot live in your country anymore." The chief was angry and yet was frightened. So he told the prophet that he would go back to his own land and see if that word were true or false. If false, he would return and kill the prophet for speaking in contempt of his beautiful land. Swiftly, the oarsmen and the mat sails took the chief back to his island. As he came around the eastern side of Hawaii, he landed and climbed to the highest point from which he could have a glimpse of his loved Puna. There in the distance, it lay under heavy clouds of smoke covering all the land. When the winds lifted the clouds, rolling them away, he saw that all his fertile plain was black with lava, still burning and pouring out constantly volumes of dense smoke. The remnants of forests were also covered with clouds of smoke through which darted the flashing flames which climbed to the tops of the tallest trees. Pele had heard the boasting chief and had shown that no land around her pit of fire was secure against her will. Kelikuku caught a long vine, hurled it over a tree, and hung himself. Kapapala. Another chief by the name of Kapapala heard of Pele. He went to the edge of the crater and there found a group of beautiful women. He was welcomed by Pele. They delighted in each other. Many were the games and contests. The chief was so frequently the victor that at last he boasted that he could ride his surfboard on the waves of her lake of fire. She was angry at the thought that he dared to desecrate her sacred home. He defied her, caught his surfboard, threw it on a wave as it struck the encircling wall, then leaped on his board and launched out on the fire waves. It is said that, to show his contempt for the power of Pele, he even stood on his head and was carried safely for a time on the crest of the red rolling surf. Pele became very angry as she saw him fleeing from her over the lake of fire, so she called to her fire servants, the Omakwas, or ghost gods, of the crater, and they hurled other fire waves across the lake against the one the chief was riding. These twisted and turned that wave. They broke its crest. The chief and his surfboard were tossed up in a whirlpool of fire. Then he dropped into the heart of the flame and was lost.